guest today is an expert on what is happening around the world when it comes to the church, and 1 billion souls is just the start. Dr. James Davis is a front-runner in the worldwide cause of spreading Christ's love into every nation. Working on the front lines of Christian evangelism, Dr. James founded Cutting Edge International and co-founded Billion Soul Network. These two organizations have the common goal of seeing 1 billion souls saved for Christ. Dr. James encourages Western Christians to connect with God's global mission in his book, We Are the Church. Dr. James lives in the greater Orlando area with his wife, Sherry, and their 2 daughters. Please welcome the trailblazer in Christian evangelism, Dr. James Davis.
Good to have you with me. Good to be with you, Leon. Enjoy.
Talking about the church around the world. Now, you and I, off camera, were talking about the negative comments we hear about what's going on around the world. Christianity is wah-wah, and nothing great's happening. Like, we just don't seem to hear. We get these little glimpses, but you travel an amazing amount around the globe.
Right.
And, I mean, 10 years ago when I first heard you talk about the church, I think that's what hooked me and said, okay, I like this guy.
Right.
I want to hang out with you. It's because how you look at the church and what you know about it. So can you just go for it right now?
You know,
what's happening?
I've been on this journey, and if you would have asked me, 15 years ago, what do I know? I only knew something about my tribe and maybe a little bit outside of my tribe. And I'm thankful for what I knew, but today I come at it from a totally different side. 4% of Christianity is in North America. 96% of Christianity is not in North America. So if we worked really hard to master our 4%, we might conclude we're experts. We know what's going on, but the truth of the matter is we're more than failing. We got a 4% grade. So we have to, in the West, we have to get outside of our silos and see what the Lord is doing all over the world. I call it raising a mountain of ministry around the world. Seeing what God is doing and understanding that is a phenomenal time for the West to connect with the rest to finish the Great Commission. And if we don't do that, they're going to go finish it without us. And so we have the opportunity to move from parenting to partnering. The church today is growing faster than it's ever grown before. We're adding any given day 100 to 125,000 new people coming to Christ every day.
Every day. Over 100,000 every day.
Almost 125,000 on a given day. And we're averaging about 1,100 new churches every day. And it's accelerating. And we're just going to see more and more of that as we go forward. So this is the greatest time to be a part of what the Lord is doing around the world.
How come nobody else is sharing stats like that?
You know, how I came to the stat on 4 and 96% is I've been traveling around the world, assessing what's going on, and came to the realization that there's approaching 2 billion Christians in the world. When you bring in Protestants and Catholics together, it's about 2.4 actually. But let's say we just focus on Protestantism just for a second. 1.3 billion Christians in the world, 50 million here. That percentage plays out to 3 to 4% in North America. So I didn't read that anywhere. I didn't go to 19 missiology books. I just said, wait a minute, what are the numbers? So when I came to the realization that there's 4% at the most here, then I realized I got a lot of work to do to understand what's going on. Now, I don't know what my quotient level would be today, but I can tell you it's not 4% and it's not 8%, and it's way on up higher because I chose intentionally to get out and understand what's going on in the world.
Okay, you were telling us how many air miles you've got.
Yeah, well, 8.5 million actual air miles and counting.
You are out there. We're not just talking. You are seeing from country to country to country. What is God doing? And the men in your life, the network that you've been able to build, discover, you call it tying knots as you bring another relationship in. You've got some astounding people in your friendship circle.
Well, I'm just grateful for it. I think it is the greatest currency on earth is relational currency. And how we trade on that currency is extremely important. And how we tie relational knots becomes even more important if you're trying to finish the Great Commission. If you're just trying to, build some friendships, that's great, that's wonderful, but that's one level of currency. But if you're trying to do something that's never been done before, you're going to have a lot more than 2 or 3 knots. The more knots you have, the bigger net you can have, and the bigger harvest you can have. And it takes time to tie those knots. And I feel like over the years we've learned how to do a lot of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the churches that you're seeing, because to say everyone seems to think that, America and Canada, that's just the bulk of Christianity, and we're trying to save the heathen world.
Right.
And so now you're here going, 4%.
Right.
And then 96% are them out there.
Right.
And you're telling me story after story of them sending missionaries to America and Canada.
That's correct, yeah. It's what I call the circumference of Christianity, and it's also what I call the gospel that went to the far reaches of the earth is now coming back as well. So when we talk about Fiji, for example, Suliasi Carullo, the work that he's doing there, he's doing work here in North America as well as in 115 other countries of the world. But that's also true of other key people that God has raised up, because it's all about the mission. It's all about fulfilling the Great Commission. So if you're going to finish the Great Commission, it's every ethnic group, it's every nation. So America, for those in Africa or in Europe or in Asia, has to be part of their focus, because it's the whole world. So if you're part of a Great Commission mindset, you're going to bring North America into that understanding, and you're going to want to help make disciples and plant churches here. And frankly, we need all the help we can get here in North America.
Wow.
But our problem is that we think we can handle it by ourselves. Another paradigm for this, Leon, is that here in North America, we have home missions and then we have foreign missions. But the rest of the world just has missions. They don't call it home and foreign. They just call it missions.
Right. Okay,
because we as Christianity matured, we were building our home base and we were sending and sending and sending, which is okay. So in our mindset, we develop home and foreign, home and international. But they don't see it that way. They say world missions. Let's go take the gospel to the whole world. And we're going to have to reframe our thinking. We have to move to a really global understanding. And as soon as we do that, we're going to realize we can't do it by ourselves. Even in our own backyard, we need help.
Wow. When you talk about Suliasi, the guy in Fiji, let's talk a little bit about some of the things. I know we're going to do more shows, and we're actually going to interview some of these men in Amsterdam coming up.
Yeah.
But tell me a little bit about what has this guy done? Because it blows the mind. He's in Fiji.
Yeah.
And he's basically taking the gospel to every house.
Yeah. What he did is Fiji is the 167th poorest nation in the world. And so I hear people say, well, if you just have more money, you can solve it. Now, money is important, but it's more than money. It's motivation. We have models, methods, we have everything under the sun, but we have to get motivated. They may not have as much money, but their motivation. So 25 years ago, Suliasi started his church, World Harvest Center, and we're supposed to be back at his missions convention. You need to go to that missions convention. But he shared the gospel to every home in the Fijian Islands. He equipped leaders to do that. That's 300 islands. They planted churches on every island. Then you got to do your Samaria. So that's Oceania, and they planted churches in all 22 of their island nations. And then you got to get out to the four corners of the earth. So in the last 25 years, they've planted over 5,100 churches in 116 nations of the world, primarily among unreached people groups. We're not trying to plant a church next to a church. We're trying to plant a church where there is no church. See, we have to move from competition to completion. You see, for so long, we're all elbowing for the territory that's already been conquered. We have to now partner in areas of the world where they've never heard. The leadership principle, what got you here will not necessarily get you there. And there comes a trade-off where you start letting go of certain things that got you here to embrace what God's given to you to take you the rest of the way. And that's what's happening globally. And it's really exciting to be a part of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's take a break right here, and then we're going to come back. And if you want to hear a lot more about what's going on and some of the thinking of this man, he wrote this book, We Are the Church. And he co-wrote it with Leonard Sweet, and it's the untold story of the global awakening. You need to read it just to get a whole new paradigm shift of what in the world is going on with the church. It'll, light you up. We'll be right back.
It's illegal to worship in a place, the Lord in Iran. It's illegal to lead another person to Jesus Christ.
We believe Jesus Christ came to give every person on this planet a chance to live with power, passion, and purpose. Through award-winning, world-class TV programs like this and life-giving resources in Spanish, French, Italian, Russian, and Hindi, Spirit Contemporary is changing lives around the world. Considerable expenses are involved, but each person reached is absolutely worth the cost. People are saved, their faith revived, eternities transformed, all because of your support. With your donation today, you will receive today's special resource.
With the help of technology, it is now easier than ever to connect with friends and family all over the globe. And for the first time ever, Springs Church is available to watch online. Get access to Spirit Contemporary Church every single week. You'll enjoy great music and an inspiring message from Leon Fontaine. You'll even be able to connect with people from around the world.
This is my personal invitation to join me on Springs Online. Welcome back. My guest today is Dr. James Davis, and we're talking about the church, the global church.
Yes.
Where do you want to go next?
I like to talk about the hard places. You know, the reason why the Great Commission isn't finished is because it's hard. If it was easy, I think it would be done. So in the network, we try to think of what is the hardest place to conquer. And if we can figure out a way to do that, then the rest of it will be not as difficult. So we are willing to take on some of the hard stuff. So when I think about the underground church, I think of the Middle East. There's not a day that goes by we don't hear something about the Middle East.
Yeah.
A few years ago, an undisclosed place, 3 years ago, we had an underground meeting, and it took us 2 years to get it ready. And we had key leaders in one undisclosed place from all 22 nations of the Middle East.
Wow.
And we had men and women from very difficult places: Syria, Iran, Iraq, Egypt. You name that whole piece of the puzzle there. So there was one guy that was from Iran. And we hear every day something about Iran almost. And so there was 5 guys there and from Iran, and 3 of them had been in prison on numerous occasions. And so we asked one particular guy to share his story. And so he starts talking about what it's like to be a Christian in Iran. And by the way, we're approaching 300,000 Iranian Christians now in the nation of Iran. And it's not because we have missionaries there. No organization has a missionary there.
No organization
has a missionary
in Iran. And
right.
There's 300,000 Christians.
And there's not been a church built in Iran in 31 years.
Not one church built.
And not one seminary, not one Bible school since the revolution 32 years ago. But what's happening is that the Lord is giving visions to the Muslim world, and they're coming to Christ. Just like, think about it, when Abraham decided he wanted to pack up and leave mom and dad, so to speak. Well, what caused him to do that? He saw something that mom and dad didn't see. And he packed up and he left and said, I'm going to follow this Lord. And I don't know where I'm going, but I know I'm leaving. So God is awakening people like this in Iran. So this leader shared, a couple times he'd been in prison. And now when we think of prison, sometimes here in North America, we may think of air condition and cable television and things like that. That's not prison in Iran. Very disanitary, maybe 8 to 10 people in a small cell, maybe 1 meal a day, desperate conditions. And so this guy is sharing his story about how he was able to share the gospel with the other guys that were in the cell, and how he grew as a Christian because of what he went through. And then he looked at everybody else in the room. He said, I recommend prison for every one of you at least one time in your life. Now, there weren't many takers for that, but the point is that there's so much going on in the underground church, and the price that's leveraged every day, that for us, oftentimes it's inconceivable that a man or woman would be willing to do that. We complain if it's too cold or too hot, if the traffic's too long, or the food wasn't cooked right. But they're believers in the world.
Why would he go to prison?
Because of sharing Christ.
So he shared Christ, and that's illegal.
It's illegal. It's illegal. It's illegal to worship in a place, the Lord in Iran. It's illegal to lead another person to Jesus Christ. But what's happening is that there's a surge of people wanting to do stronger missional work in the Middle East, and it's hard work. But we're making progress. But there's stories we don't hear for a lot of reasons. One is because to tell the story would endanger believers' lives, and so a lot of the stories are not told. And but there's tremendous underground work that is going on. When I was there at this particular meeting, I got up one morning. I was sitting in this hotel room, and I was sitting on the edge of the bed like I so often do every morning, and I was just thanking the Lord for the new day. And the Lord whispered something to me. He asked me a question, and he asked me, how many chairs would you take responsibility for the marriage supper of the Lamb when we all get together? Now, I didn't really know how to respond to that because, the Lord's coming, and one day we're going to have the marriage supper of the Lamb. And by the way, there are going to be a lot of people there. Some people think, there's going to be just a handful are going to make it. No, there's going to be billions in heaven. Some people say, yeah, but the Lord said, narrow is the way. Well, there's still going to be billions that are going to be there. And then people say, well, how can you say that? And I said, there's over 1 billion Christians on the planet now. So if the Lord came, that's the first billion. So we got 1 billion. And then I think about the last 2,000 years of people who've died in Christ. I don't know how many that is, but stack that on top of the billion. Think about the children that have been aborted the last 30 years, more than 1 billion of them in the last 30 years globally. Well, they all went to heaven. What about all those looking forward to the coming of the Lord in the Old Testament era? Well, they all went to heaven. So I'm not sure how many billion, but there are going to be a lot of people there. So I'm sitting on the edge of the bed, and the Lord asked me a question. He says, how many chairs will you take responsibility for? I didn't know how to answer that. Tears just welled up my eyes, thinking the Lord would think I was even worthy enough to be asked the question, how many would you take responsibility for? And so I spoke out loud to the Lord, and I said, Lord, I don't know how to respond to that, but I want to do all I can to keep the angels extremely busy, putting more leaves in the table and more chairs at the table. Because, Leon, I can't imagine us being at the greatest wedding of all and not having brought somebody there. I can't imagine that. To be with the family of God for the very first time and not added to that family. And that's what the network is about. It's not about egos and logos. It's not about jostling for position. It's about the assignment. And once we get gripped with the fact that we're going to be measured by that when we stand before the Lord, a lot of the other things that used to matter really don't matter. Other leaders around the world, underground churches, they get it. There's a price to pay. Oftentimes we forget that. And it grips me with the reality that the Lord would trust you and me and our television audience with the gospel, the greatest treasure. And how we steward that is how we're going to be measured in eternity.
Wow, that is so true. I think we forget, the church world just forgets sometimes because we get so focused on our car, our house, paying our bills, raising our kids. All of these are fine with God. But the seek first thing is the principle that keeps our lives focused on our purpose. Seek first the kingdom of God, the advancement of his kingdom. Everywhere Jesus went in the New Testament, some people think that Jesus' message, I'm even hearing people say Jesus' messages are irrelevant because they're speaking in the Old Covenant. He was talking about the kingdom. And he's telling us that it's about the kingdom. I remember going to one of your Billion Souls conference where I spoke with a guy about Iran who was going into Iran with television. He had millions watching this television show, and I said, well, wow, what are you showing them? He said, I just have doctors who understand English and what's the language they would speak there? Farsi, They would read books on apologetics, and they'd interpret it to the viewer. Hour after hour. I said, that's got to be the most boring TV going I can think of, is a guy sitting there reading an apologetics book. But they were getting saved. And what he said to me was he cannot get home churches built fast enough because, like you said, there's no buildings, there's no this, but they're getting together.
And he's featured in that book on We Are
is
the
he
Church.
In there?
Lazarus is in the book because he has the best network in the Middle East. And he is our partner in the network. He's an incredible leader.
Wow. So God's doing incredible things. And the reason we're not hearing, and we can't hear detailed stories,
Right.
is you said earlier, we can't put at risk
Right.
what God is doing there in Iran.
That's right.
We can't let out. And I'm getting phone calls, because of the television station, I'm getting phone calls from people in other countries who are hearing about Spirit Contemporary and what God is doing and saying to me,
Right.
we want to talk to you, we want to figure, but we can't have you let this out there.
Right.
And let the governments know what's going on. So this really is like a bit of a cloak and dagger. The
Right.
church world is on a battle,
Right.
and there's some of it that is underground.
Yes.
And we need to let it just continue to win souls at the pace that it is.
Yeah, and I would encourage every Christian, figure out what you don't know about Christianity, and figure out about what you don't know about where the gospel is not. Because you and I cannot make a contribution to where the gospel isn't until you know where the gospel is not. And it's not just about preaching the gospel in areas where it's being preached. Paul said, I choose not to build upon another man's foundation. Paul said, I would rather preach in areas where no one has ever preached than to build on somebody else's work. And that was his focus. And because that helps us to move it down the field. And I believe the Lord is raising up that kind of circumference of Christianity around the world, and it's compounding. And those who do not get connected with that, it's like a guy standing on a beach and he sees the tsunami coming and saying, I'm not going to get wet. You're going to do more than get wet. You're going to get knocked off that beach, because that is what is happening. Christianity is growing at about 7%. So in 11 years from now, Christianity will double. We're headed to doubling Christianity in the earth. And that's happening all over the world. Now, we need that kind of impact here in North America. And what we've got to do is reassess our paradigms and moving from that motif I had indicated, parenting to partnering, and a little dose of humility will go a long ways. Because the doorway to teachability is humility. And so we in the West need to become learners again. We need to learn from what the Lord is doing, learn from those who are making it happen, and let it rub off on us. And frankly, not care who gets the credit. Let's just get the job done.
You know, our time is finished. It went by really quickly. But the fact is, and correct me wherever I'm wrong on stats, that although the global church is growing where it's going to double in 11 years, in North America, I don't see that great of stats.
Right. No, we're struggling. And it's because we're staying inside instead of outside. See, what we've done is we've stopped sharing Christ. Now, I don't usually say, share your faith. I usually say, share Jesus Christ. It's not my faith that saves you, or your faith saves me. But if I would share Jesus, it's amazing what the power of the Holy Spirit does. But we've stopped sharing Christ in the West.
Yeah.
We're more into what is truth rather than who is truth. We've got to get back out into the marketplace and share Christ. And when we do, wow, what would it be like if Christianity was to double in North America in 10 or 15 years? What would it be like if we went from 50 million to 100 million Christians in North America? You say, well, that's not possible. Really, it's not? I can't ask every Christian to lead one to Christ in 10 years? Is that unreasonable? No.
Nope, not at all.
And so it would not be difficult for us to see that happen in our own area of the world.
Man, you and I are, we're going to be doing a number of shows on some of the heroes of the faith that are still alive.
That's right. Yeah.
And if you're watching this show and you're catching it, you need to stay tuned, because in the days ahead, we are literally going to be unpacking. You're going to meet some of God's generals on the planet today as Dr. Davis and I tell you what's going on, what they've done. We're going to interview them. We're going to show you their churches, videos, pictures, stuff that's going to blow your mind about what the global church is doing. Thank you for being with me.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
Devoted, a daily devotional created with you in mind. Easy to read and simple to understand. These 2-minute faith boosters are available in 8 different languages. Watch it on YouTube or have the booklet sent directly to your home. You can also receive Devoted to your email inbox daily. Become inspired as Leon Fontaine shares practical biblical teaching. Devoted is literally at your fingertips. Transform your life with this Spirit Contemporary devotional. Sign up to receive Devoted today.
I'm so glad you were part of the program today. You know, it's amazing what God is doing around the world. And there is an urgency to get the gospel out in a way that people understand, that they'll listen and not turn it off. I've noticed in 30 years of ministry that the second you become judgmental and harsh and legalistic, people run in droves. Even Christians leave the faith. That is why Jesus, filled with grace and truth, he is a spirit contemporary person. Spiritually alive, is powerful. He does miracles, signs, wonders, yet contemporary means relevant, cool, for today, with no compromise. I'd love to have you become a part of the family here of this ministry that is going around the world for your gift of $45 or more. I'd love to send you this book that we've been talking about called We Are the Church, the untold story of God's global awakening. There are a ton of people that this story is being unfolded, it's being told, that'll make you excited about the church and what is going on. And as never before, your gift is so needed as this program goes around the world. And not only the television program, but we are supplementing so many people with this devoted. You need to get a copy of this. We'll send it along as well. It's a daily devotional, and it'll change your life as you get a hold of Jesus and get to know him. It's also in all of these languages. Listen to this. It's in English and French and Spanish, Urdu, and Italian, Russian, Indonesian, Mandarin, and there's more that we're working on right now. Your giving is not just touching the English world, but families and young men and women in nations around the world. Go to your phone right now. Become a part of something that is powerful at bringing Jesus to every emerging generation.
We trust that you are being blessed, uplifted, and encouraged in your Christian walk through today's program. As a viewer, you should know that we care about you. We value you greatly and appreciate your prayers. Did you know that Spirit Contemporary International is taking the good news of Jesus Christ around the world through award-winning programs like this? We are actively translating ministry programs into languages like Spanish, French, Italian, and even Russian. We even air on Islamic television stations in the Middle East. This means that millions upon millions of people are hearing about Jesus Christ